It is a look back in time, the year 1993, WCW. We're on the journey with WCW. We've done several WCW shows. JML here, Fire Frank on the other side. Fire Frank joining me while Charlie is on assignment. Uh, one of these days, we'll have the three amigos back for another look back in time. Frank, how you doing? How you doing today?
Doing great. We're going back in time to like my favorite era here. I've gotten full into the '90s nostalgia here, if you can see. '93, great time for wrestling, in my opinion. Maybe
Let's
not for others, but
let's give a little backdrop, right? This is the 10-year anniversary of Starrcade. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Frank. The first main event
yeah,
for Starrcade was Harley Race and Ric Flair
right.
in
'83, yeah, in the steel
'83,
cage
where Ric Flair won his first
was
title,
his second title, I believe.
second title, but it's the
But still,
first
the first one done on a big show like this,
big show.
Thanksgiving night. It was pre-pay-per-view, closed circuit.
Yeah. Um, so there's a lot of story built here. It's
Yes,
set in North Carolina as well. This event.
right. It was a good set of circumstances because I know originally the main event was supposed to be Sid Invader, and then the whole stabbing with Arn Anderson occurred, and
Yep.
then they went back to Ric Flair, which being in North Carolina, nobody better. Like I said, 10th anniversary. Who better to be going for the title again in
And
North Carolina?
and for me, it's it's crazy to think how this show almost didn't happen, and it took a scissoring, not the Billy Gunn kind, uh, literally scissors to Arn Anderson, and Sid got fired. That would have been the main event, Sid and Vader here in '93.
Go figure. Arn Anderson helping Ric Flair inadvertently. Yeah, I mean it was Rick's big first big. I mean he had we talked the last time about Havoc '93 when he was fighting Rude. But yeah, this is his first full year back in WCW after he left his short run with Vince, and yeah, it's funny how it would have been a completely different thing. We talked about Havoc last time. They were setting up the Sid face turn that lasted all of like a couple of months because of that incident. Actually, not even a couple months. I think it was right after that. Um, Allegedly, they even taped footage of him with the title for the VAR after the show, so it was pretty much a Sid thing. I
Yeah,
often wonder where that would have led. Obviously, with Hogan coming in the next year, they probably just would have turned him heel and had him drop it to Hogan instead of Flair, maybe. But I think this worked out for the better.
I agree. Um, Again, this time was still the transition period between Bill Watts, who was relieved of his duties for a multitude of reasons. Some off-color comments, I think, ultimately got him. And the C-list announcer at the time, Eric Bischoff, took the reins of the company.
Yeah, big surprise there too. Big upset that he got the executive vice president position there.
It pretty much Jr. Uh, yep, the Jr. thought he was going to get the job, but because Jr. and Bill Watts were so close, that was ultimately the deciding factor as to why Jim Ross didn't get that job.
Yeah, and that's why
Um,
he split right at the beginning of the year there and went to WWF.
yep, and
Bischoff
Eric
was
wasn't
something
really
different.
involved. Eric wasn't really involved in creative. He was just trying to broker deals
Right.
and
And he did.
TV and whatever else.
He did indeed. Yeah. Right away, he actually was pretty successful with that. I know we talked about those infamous tapings at Disney, but that was a big money deal for them to do television at Universal Studio. I mean, at Disney's MGM Studios, whatever it was. Not Disney. Disney was that at Disney World? I think.
Yes.
Yeah. So he did that. That was something he started right away. Obviously, he brought Flair back in.
It was at
Um,
MGM, but now it's called Disney Hollywood Studios.
yeah, they were taping a lot of worldwide there, I believe. Which is apparently the show where they tape footage of people with belts before they won them. That was the whole thing. Thankfully, the internet was in its infancy then, but the
Yeah,
real hardcore IWC existed then, and they knew about all this stuff.
yeah,
But yeah, but Bischoff coming in was like was like you said, a major transition. He had a different vision. He looked at things differently. They saw this younger, intelligent guy with ideas. They gave him a shot, and obviously led to their most successful period ever.
and I think for them, they didn't want a quote unquote wrestling lifer for
Yeah,
the position, and they took Bischoff, and it was a gamble. And say what you want to say about how it ended for Bischoff, but there were certainly some higher than high peaks during his tenure as the head of WCW. Um, Show opens. I love this commentary team. Shivani and Ventura, very underrated duo. Um, you have Vader arriving and training. That whole montage in the beginning just like built how much of a unstoppable monster Vader has been. Vader was amped. He was wearing the free jacket that he got from the Ribera Steakhouse. Shout out to the that steakhouse where everyone goes, all the legends go. Uh, and I'm gonna make a joke here. Ric Flair late to his own show. He didn't even leave his house yet.
amazing, right?
Ric Flair didn't leave his house. Gene Okerlund is on the scene. It's very dramatic. It's very well done. Very well done. I remember watching it as a kid, and it really roped you in. It really roped you in. His family's like sending him
Right.
off. It was almost like sending him off to slaughter.
Yeah,
Like
that's
that's
how
what
it
it felt
felt.
like.
And it was like the first time he would like shown his family like that. He was never like even when he was a babyface, he never really went like that. It was like a different side, like the real Rick.
Yeah,
But we saw him with his family. We saw David, young David there. We saw much younger Reed, um,
Ashley.
Ashley, of course. Um, you might know her as Charlotte today.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was a cool thing with Gene there. It was like a real. It had like a real feel to it. It felt like a real thing. It didn't feel like they were shooting like a vignette. It felt like
yeah.
this is
The only
really Rick saying
misstep is
bye
when
to
I think Reed says, "Close the door, Dad. I'm freezing."
Daddy. Always working to ready, kid. Rest in peace, Reed.
Yeah,
But sad story.
yeah,
Yeah, very cool setup. Like I said, the video showing Rick's all like his rise, and it transitions to Vader being a monster, and then you just see them, Gene showing up, like, "Hey, Rick, you should have been in the building already. Let's go."
yeah,
Um, they had like a cool conversation. It was just like a really low key. You're right. It felt like they were like saying goodbye before he's ended by Vader.
yeah.
Many were at the time.
Opening match. A very underrated tag team. The Pretty Wonderful Orndorff and Roma versus Scorpio and Bagwell. Scorpio and Bagwell were the tag champs at one point during this period of time. I think they had a cup of coffee with the belts.
Right.
Um, I Pretty Wonderful gets the belts at some point during this tenure.
Yeah, they had a cut. Actually, I think they had maybe two reigns with it. But yeah, I think since the last show we did Havoc '93. We had Orndorff randomly with the Assassin, and then, like I said, it led into this tag team being formed. Speaking of Bill Watts, this actually tag team was formed when Paul Romer turned on Eric Watts
Yes.
when he was teaming with him, and then joined up with Orndorff, which made more sense. Roma is a better heel than he was a face, so it was a nice little heel mid card tag team. Something they needed at the time. Two guys that can work, the good heels, and yeah. Obviously, we talked about Scorpion and Bagwell the last show. I think about they had just won the titles and lost them right back to Nasty Boys. So
Yep.
random tag match on paper, but at the time, it's a smart way to open the show. Get the crowd going, and it did.
When did Roma leave the Horsemen?
They kind of just like ended the Horsemen, essentially.
Like there was no on screen, and they just
No,
ended it,
like
right?
they lost the tag titles. Him and Arn lost, and then Arn disappeared after the Sid thing for a while. So Rick was kind of dissociated from them, and he was just like I said, randomly teaming with Eric Watts, and he turned on it, and then he joined up with Orndorff, and then it was like I don't know. They didn't kind of like they kind of just disappeared. It wasn't one of the Horsemen breakups. It was just kind of like we forgot about them. And honestly, they wouldn't be back as the Horsemen for another 2 years till Pillman joined and Flair turned on Sting for the 70,000th time.
Yeah, I guess because Arn was hurt, that they just teamed him with
Yeah,
Watts for the heel turn. So
yeah, they were doing like a little thing. Crazy to think that was only 2 years before Nitro started this event. What a difference! A couple of years.
yeah, I mean the presentation's
Yeah,
different too.
very low key. I like
Yeah.
the entrance. It's nice, little curtain, little stuff. Nothing too crazy. The ramp, I always love that ramp.
um, I'll tell you, not a bad, not a bad little tag to start. I'm going to tell you about something that was awful. The following match, but before that, Flair and Gene are in the limo. He's talking about, what would happen about the loss. Obviously, careers on the line. Back then, I think Flair's like 41, 42, maybe. So he's
Yeah,
probably like
he's
41.
in his 42, 43. He's in that early 40s at the time.
We're already doing Ric Flair retirement matches in '93.
Yeah,
Uh,
they did another one just a year later too.
yeah,
So
yeah.
they had to fill it, I guess that was their big thing.
Was Flair the booker? Was
At
this the
this
time that
time,
Flair was the booker?
I'm trying to remember. I know he was. Hmm, he might have been on the committee at this time. I know he'd been on and off several times, but it's very possible that at this time he was involved. I know by the time Hogan comes in, he's not. We'd have to look that up.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that up. Um,
Yeah, so obviously they're still talking in the limo. Again, gives it that realism feel. Always like
Awesome
that
Kong
opportunity.
and
Oh
Shockmaster.
boy,
Can you let me know?
not that Awesome Kong, by the way, guys. Unfortunately, it wasn't the one we know as Awesome Kong.
Can
That
you
would have
let
been.
me know what were they thinking looking at? It was
What
a
would they,
90-second dud.
why was Harley Race given this terrible tag team to manage?
Oh my god. Weren't they like henchmen for Vader? Was it like wasn't that the
Kind of, yeah. Like they even like I know there was a clash. I think the last Clash of Champions before this is where like Sting and Flair teamed to face them. They beat them like also in like 90 seconds. So they weren't exactly threats. They were just like you said, generic big guy heels.
Yep.
But yeah, the less said about this match, the better. Shockmaster, obviously, to say the least, none of the things he did in WCW hit. He was in a War Games,
They can say
but
that he didn't hit, but he tripped.
he tripped for sure. He definitely took a fall or two. At this point, he was. I think they were still playing off him being clumsy. I don't know. Clumsy Uncle Fred, as Cody would say.
Um,
Yeah, this didn't need to be on the show in the slightest.
no, it didn't need.
They were still trying to. They were still trying to do something with Shockmaster, and within 6 months, he was back on Raw after Earthquake left, feuding with Yokozuna briefly.
And then
Back to
left again.
Typhoon, then left again, and then we haven't seen him since outside of the gimmick battle royal at the time. Maybe that one Raw when the Shockmaster showed up.
Flair arrives to the arena. Jesse, the body, he's calmed down now because he was afraid
Yeah.
Flair was going to get into a car accident on the way to the arena. Um,
Thankfully, he wasn't driving.
yeah, Steven Regal versus Steamboat. Uh, definitely not their best match, but still entertaining. They did. They telegraphed the draw all the time. I think that's the issue. That was the big issue. Can you imagine being like, I think Regal was like 22, 23, and he's already in the ring with Steamboat. He was in the ring with Davey Boy Smith a couple months before. Man, the dude had it really early on, didn't he?
Yeah, even here, he was already a veteran by this point, even though he was early 20s. He was working with, like you said, all these guys. He's working with Steamboat several times, won the title off him. He was pretty much like the guy they put in there. Okay, you're going to go out there and have your time limit draw, but with all these guys, he's going to do his best. But it was a little telegraphed. That would happen quite a bit back then. They would just always do a time limit draw with Regal when he was TV champ. That was kind of like his thing.
It was to get him like more heel
Yeah.
heat, which is fine.
This was like the rematch since he had beaten Steamboat. Yeah, they always had decent matches, pretty good matches together, I thought. Yeah, but Regal
Yeah,
would work with pretty much everybody. I mean, even work with Inoki the next year on pay-per-view.
for sure.
So yeah, Regal even then was a top class talent.
Yep.
Right in the neck.
Oh, he's so good. I mean, when you talk about like top tier wrestlers, if you don't have Regal on your like top 100 of all time, I don't know what kind of fan you are. The dude is he's certainly on that list. Maybe one day we'll have a list. We'll create a list between the three of us.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah, don't.
um,
I would say so. Yeah, don't let it get the fact that he never like was world champion or whatever. Let you know what he's done over the last 30, well, even 40 years, I think.
I mean Scott Hall wasn't a world champion.
Yeah, but he's more remembered than a lot of guys that were.
Yeah, Rick Rude technically wasn't a world champion, right? Uh,
You know who was? Great Khali.
yeah.
No, think about that.
We have the tag team that's going to be known as the Godwins, Tex Schlesinger and Shanghai Pierce.
Yes, Henry Godwin wearing a mask for reasons I'll never understand.
Uh, how thin was Phineas Godwin, Midian? He was
Yeah,
really thin.
he was young and thin here, man. That's kind of like when they, like I said, first of all, Henry's wearing a mask here, so I didn't. So when they first came over, like when he came out was Henry Godwin, I didn't realize that was him, even though the mask wasn't much of a mask, we could see his face. But so when Phineas came in, I didn't even realize that was him at first because he had gotten so much bigger.
Yep.
Although it's pretty obvious. You're like, yeah, I mean, they were generic heel jobber type tag team. They lost to a lot of guys. They had a cool theme song, like a lot of people did at that time. But
Jack and
Jack and
Payne.
Payne, interesting
I
tag
mean,
team.
they tried to get Max Payne over, and he was
Yeah,
popular, but it just didn't work. You could tell, like he Max Payne didn't have that love for the business. He was just kind of thrown into it because he was a big guy and needed to make some money, and it
yeah, they
is what it is. But
yeah. I mean, they'd go on to have some fun brawls. Obviously, working with Jag with Foley, he got the best that he could out of him, and they had a nice little tag run. This wasn't much of a match. They were just like establishing them as the new tag team. They didn't really have anything to do with Cactus after he lost to Vader, so it was kind of like they were just, oh, we're going to put him in a tag team.
yeah, we had a
Unfortunately, they could never, fully use him to his potential.
we had a Kyle Petty appearance during the show.
Oh yes, future NWO member, right?
Future
NWO wrestling
NWO
team.
member comparing his dad's retirement to Flair's potential retirement.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we had that.
He had a
Um,
sweet mullet, so that was something.
yeah, yeah. It wasn't Weird Al Yankovic. It was Kyle Petty. Um, U.S. title match. 2 out of 3 falls.
Mm-hmm.
The Natural. Don't call me natural.
True.
Greatest song ever. So bad that it's great. Versus Austin. Before he's Stone Cold, he's Stunning Steve.
Yeah, post Hollywood Blondes. Now he's fully just singles Austin again.
Yep. People forget he held the TV title for like a year and a half. He was the
Basically,
longest
yeah.
reigning television champion of all time.
He had 2 reigns, but he was basically champion for over a year
Yeah.
and change.
Yeah.
Good run. Here they were trying to elevate him to that next level. That's the reason they broke up the tag team, was they wanted to push him. So this was the culmination of that. And I think we talked on a previous show. Him and Dustin always had good chemistry. So
Yeah,
it's a good pairing.
It was a good match.
Little wonky at parts. The lights went out. Kind of a. I didn't like the finish, like with where they use a DQ in one of the
Yeah.
falls. It shouldn't be. If the title's going to change hands, how you going to have a DQ be one of the falls? I never really understood that. The over the top rope rule, which is always silly.
Yep.
But I mean, Austin wins the title, so they're pushing him to that next level allegedly at this point.
And it was, I don't know, like this was the start of the push of Dustin after he was heavily pushed for about 2 years. And this is where the wheels started coming off, and then he got involved in the feuds with Parker and his stud stable. And pretty much it never ended until Uncensored 95, where the blade job happens.
Turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to his career, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of like you could tell different people in power. Dusty no longer having any kind of power there.
It's funny because Bischoff will always talk about, I'm trying to get rid of, like, he wasn't a fan of the Southern wrestling. He was trying to get WCW away from the Southern wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets rid of Dustin as like a champion or focal point. Puts Austin there, who also has a really thick Texas accent, with Parker as his manager, thick Texas accent, right?
Yeah.
But for me, they could have done a lot more with Dustin. Like,
absolutely.
The fact that Dustin and Vader only had that one match just bewildered me. And that was a good match.
Yeah, Dustin, I know. Yes, he got it. Maybe he got his spot because of his father and all that. But the guy actually backed it up. Even at this time period, the guy was great in the ring.
That was a Clash of Champions, like before this.
Oh
right?
Yeah, I remember that match. Yeah,
Dustin and Vader, very good match. And
it's a shame
that forget how big Dustin is. He's like 6'6", 6'7". Big dude.
He's in his early 20s here, and he's big guy. He can work. Yeah, maybe not the best on the mic, a little more of a Dusty ripoff in a sense, but the guy could go.
He was the natural.
And he was the natural. He was. And he was popular with the crowd. It's not like they didn't accept him.
No, he was great.
I was big into him at the time. I was a big Dusty Rhodes fan, for sure.
I was like, man, this is the world champion right here. World champion. We never got it. Never got it. But you know what? Like we were saying before with Regal, you know what?
You'll remember him more than a lot of people.
Maybe better off, right?
Who else had a run like that, and a completely different run with a completely different kind of character? The guy had much like his father, much like Cody, his brother. He got a lot of different characters over.
And as we're running through the card, right? What sticks out to me? This Starrcade card. How many of these superstars helped WWE win the Monday Night War?
Yeah. Once JR started bringing in all his ex-friends from here.
Well, look. Regal, okay, was one. Didn't really turn he was more ruthless aggression, right?
Yeah.
War was kind of already in the bag. But
the stuff he did, Godwin's, yeah.
The Godwins, Foley, Austin, Dustin, Vader comes on board, right? And say what you say about Vader, but he was part of WWF, right?
Right. A lot of future guys on this show.
Rude with DX. People forget that.
Scorpio not so much, but he did make it there.
Boss Man comes back.
Right. As a bigger run late in his career.
So many, like almost half of this card ends up shifting to WWE between 96 and 2000.
Yeah,
earlier.
you
And
had
Hogan
people. It was
turned the
people,
tide.
right? You had Hogan and his friends come over. Then you started seeing them going the opposite way, which wasn't happening as much until that point.
Yep.
And like I said, these guys were like the future. These are the guys who would be your big draft picks, if you will.
Correct.
Dustin,
If you will.
Austin,
If you will.
if you will.
Rick Rude and the Boss for the confusing
International.
WCW International Heavyweight title.
Was it even that at this point? I don't even remember. But yeah, pretty much. I know. I think I had to explain that to Charlie last time. I think he thinks I was making up still to this day.
Jesse calls Boss Man on commentary.
Yeah, this wouldn't last very long. It was
They hyped the new commissioner, who turns out to be Nick Bockwinkel.
right.
This was okay. It wasn't great. Certainly didn't have the WW. Like, if this was happened in WWF, definitely would have been a bigger match.
Yeah, it's funny because that when Rude quit, he was being programmed with Bossman. It never really happened.
Yep.
So it's funny how they picked it up. He just showed up on Saturday night once with his Bossman outfit, with just the Bossman crossed out on his uniform. Here he had a different kind of shirt, cop uniform, whatever you want to call it. I like the theme song though. We like to talk about theme songs. It's this generic cop show sounding song, not nearly as good as Hard Times, of course, but yeah, the Boss, man, is he big?
Yeah,
he said that on commentary once. That's led to a nice lawsuit, and Nick Bockwinkel's biggest accomplishment was stripping the name Boss from him, so he had to become something else. But that's something we can talk about in a future show.
Bockwinkel's so bad as commissioner.
It's funny for a guy that is a really good talker. Just
the best thing that happened was when JJ came over from Stanford.
And became like the de facto authority figure. Yeah, he was better at that role.
Yeah.
So yeah, Rude retains here.
I totally forgot the Nasty Boys versus Sting and Hawk from LOD. That the match, this match for the tag titles, the Nasty Boys have. This was was this like the last appearance of Missy Hyatt on pay-per-view? This had to be. This was like around the time
I think
Exit Stage left.
I think she might have shown up at Super Bowl. I gotta check, but I know she was definitely gone by like Spring Stampede the next year.
Let's take a look.
She was going early '94. It was kind of a random teaming. Well, obviously Sting and LOD always had a connection, but I think it was supposed to be another match originally, because I have the official VHS of the show. It's another reason why I watched the show so many times. In the back of the box actually advertises Sting against Rude here. So some plans must have changed.
It's crazy. I'm trying to get it here.
Anyway, yeah. This was a quite a long match.
Well, why did this have to go 30 minutes?
I don't know. Were they running short on time? So they said we have to just make this be a. And it went a legit 30 minutes too.
No, it went legit 30. Her last appearance was February 26, 1994.
Okay, so I was right.
But I'm not sure did she show up on Super Bowl?
I haven't watched that show in a while. I'd have to check.
I'm gonna have to.
Let me see if I can look it up. Super Bowl. So it would have been Super Bowl 4. She might have been gone by this point. Because the way they used to tape their TV, I mean.
I don't know if you've seen Missy Hyatt lately. She's only 59 years old, and she looks like she's 80.
I don't think she was there for that.
No, she wasn't.
Looking at a recap of the match, it doesn't mention her, so I guess I was wrong. So she did appear on TV afterward. That's the way they taped her TV back then. I can understand why she last appeared at the end of February.
Yeah, because I don't remember her being ringside for that.
Yeah, neither do I. Fight. I don't remember even like she's like kind of just. I remember he went acting as a kid. She just kind of disappeared and didn't even mention her again.
They featured her a lot. featured her a lot.
Yeah, she did lots of rather random things until she came back to manage them, and then she was gone within months.
Doomsday Device attempted here. It was pretty cool. I'm gonna be honest with you. I never liked when the Road Warriors LOD tagged with other people.
Yeah, this was like during that time where Animal was like semi-retired with the back injury, I think.
Lloyd's of London.
Yeah, the whole insurance thing. He made an appearance at I think at the War Games this year, and then all of a sudden Hawk showed up to team with Sting again. Hawk made a lot of random appearances at WCW after this. He was even around in '95, around the early Nitro era. Then he disappeared, and the LOD themselves come back, have a short run there.
Yeah,
I never did like it.
They had a match. They had a match with Harlem Heat.
Yeah,
I think they had a feud with Harlem Heat, little mini feud.
Yeah, it's funny. Funny enough, we talked about them teaming other people. I think isn't that the they had the uncensored where they was that the Warriors? Well, Warriors against Sting and Booker T. They randomly had because Luger couldn't wrestle, so the random match.
Yep.
Yeah. So much like that. I never really liked when, like you said, when they either tag with other people or do singles runs. It just didn't work for me. And I'm a big fan of the Road Warriors, but them as singles wasn't really cutting it, or even teaming with other people.
Literally. How does this go a half hour?
They must have really ran short on something, and they had to really stretch this out. Because as a non-finish,
the Shockmaster match that only lasted 90 seconds.
I mean, if this goes almost a half hour, it doesn't have a real finish, and it's not like they were stretching out for like a draw. It was just. I can understand if it was that. It wasn't even that, right? Wasn't it the DQ finish?
And you booked this as a long ass match before the other long ass match, which got less time, by the way.
Yeah, and honestly, even the Rhodes Austin match, I think, could have used some more time.
Yeah,
and this got a half hour for some.
Or you could have given the opener some more time, or you could have added another match. I'm sure they had enough talent in the back to do it.
Easily, I would say. If I ever get to talk to Eric Bischoff, I'd have to ask him that question. Why was this match booked though?
Well, you could 83 weeks. Ask Eric, and it's like,
I mean, he probably won't remember it at this point, but
you're like, hey, why did the Nasty Boys? Have they covered on 83 weeks Starrcade '94?
I'm not sure.
Let's take a look.
I don't listen to it regularly. I've listened to a couple episodes here and there.
I really like it. I don't listen every week anymore. I think I did at one point, but they all blend in. The Conrad podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's so many podcasts, and I've listened to a lot of them. But I mean, when Bischoff's on a podcast, he's very interesting when he talks. So I'm not surprised that his shows gets into the stuff. It's something I'd like to listen to more of if I had a chance. Because he's usually pretty brutally honest about everything. So,
yes, they did an episode.
Ah, nice.
Episode 35.
All right, guys. That's all right, everybody out there. That's some homework for you. Listen to this episode after you listen to this.
I'm actually probably going to listen.
Yeah, I might want to listen to that myself.
So the main event, career versus title, Vader versus Flair. Man, did they set the stage for this or what?
For sure.
I mean, the whole ride to the venue, the interviews, the package they played for Vader being this monster, it really sold the whole match and the story. They didn't even have to really have a long match. They could have had a 5-minute match, and I would have been fine with it. Typical Flair fashion. He's getting his ass kicked the entire match. He makes his Rocky-like comeback towards the end, ends up winning the match. saving his career, winning the title in front of his hometown fans that paid all the money to go see him. Um, this is classic. This is
Yeah,
honestly, this is one of the best Flair matches, I think. Period. And it's not
maybe,
just it's
yeah,
not work rate. It's the story
yeah.
that was told.
Perfect story, the perfect location. They said the crowd was going to cheer anyway, but the way they presented it, it really drew you in. Like it really like, and for a guy like Flair who's like fun, kind of odd as a babyface sometimes, this here worked perfectly. You know, him being the underdog, him being he always took a beating anyway, no matter who he was facing. But when he had to do it as the underdog face against the monster hero, it just worked. And Vader, of course, we talked enough about him in the past. How good was he at this point?
Oh, jeez.
But I mean, they're in there. They were laying in some stiff shots too, and geez, it was pretty much like fighting. Um, I'll use an analogy. If you remember some of the old video games, like maybe you remember WrestleMania 2000, you had to fight Undertaker in season mode. This is pretty much
Yep.
what Vader was at this point.
Yep.
Like you'd hit a move on him, and he would just no sell it. He would get up, he'd kill you. It would be like it would take like the hardest thing to put him down. You couldn't imagine him losing.
Yep.
And then Rick kind of just takes advantage, trips him up. It's a little wonky, but it worked in the moment. He's a big guy. He tripped him up, stacked him up, and got the pin. And the crowd goes wild. One of his best moments, winning the title in his hometown, big baby face, his big culmination of his comeback to his home in WCW. So yeah, one of my favorite matches that doesn't get talked a lot about.
Wow,
Sure.
it's David versus Goliath. It's well executed. And to think this was not even in the plans. This was like a last minute addition.
Saved us from that Sid Vader main event. That even though I'm a big Sid fan, yeah, wouldn't have held a candle to this one.
No. It's one of those happy accidents, right?
Yeah, and it just worked out perfectly. The crowd's going,
and we're not even talking about the fact that the man that 10 years ago that Flair faced in the main event is managing
yeah,
Vader. Just it's
yeah,
perfect.
perfect. Gets involved in the match and everything. It's just like that's a classic rivalry. It's just everything about it.
Shivani on commentary.
Oh yeah, marking out for Flair the whole time. Even Jesse, being the he was like really into this match. Great moment.
You can tell that the commentators went from the like they became the fandom came out during the match, and that's what you like to see.
Yeah, definitely. As they were going as nuts as the people in attendance here. Fireworks going off. Rick with a tear in his eye, of course.
What's here?
In my eye.
My eye.
Then I think the cool thing about it, we got a little bonus at the end here. He goes backstage and Gene finds him again.
Yep.
You got, him and Steamboat, longtime rivals, shaking hands, congratulating him. Sting congratulating him before he turned on him for the 7,000th time.
Well, and
I always like stuff like
Steamboat end up having a program as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you talked about that being your favorite of their matches.
Oh, man, so good.
The Spring Stampede match of '94. But yeah, so it was a little foreshadowing there, but it was a cool little thing. Showing them celebrating the locker room, tying it all together with Gene since the beginning of the show. Nice way to end.
Man, I talked with Charlie, Bash of the Beach 96.
Yeah.
People talk about how much money Gene Okerlund got paid. He was worth every penny. There was something that you empathized with Gene. He had this, or Gene would empathize with the babyface and just really sell the whole big picture of a big match. You needed someone to do it. It was Okerlund.
Right. And he had that relationship with Rick on camera for many years, like he did with Hogan, like he did with a lot of these guys. So
and no one else has been able to capture that. Think about how many backstage interviewers we've had since Okerlund. Has anyone ever come close to Gene Okerlund? Think about sports in general, right? You have Jordan, but LeBron's right on his toes, right? Or some people would even argue maybe LeBron's better. You have baseball where you have Babe Ruth and Aaron and Mays. Like you have people within shouting distance of each other. I think the only sport where people say there's no equal is hockey with Gretzky, but even you can argue maybe Ovechkin is up there with him now. There's no one in a backstage or interview role that has come close to Gene Okerlund. Then, now, and forever. Do you agree with that?
I mean, I think I'd have to. Who else, like you said, he kind of had that way about him. He had that relationship with the people, with the people he was talking to, and it made you feel like the emotion in the moment, like you said.
It came off as, even if it was
Yeah,
scripted, as non-scripted.
yeah,
It
it
was
was
like
real,
easygoing, and there was some off the script moments where you know put that cigarette out and all that stuff.
but it
It,
felt real.
it felt real.
And you could tell obviously how close he was with all these people that he was with, because you can see that kind of guy he was.
But even
He was
on
like the
Legend,
everyman. He was like the man who spoke for, like you said, the people.
yeah,
He was
even
us. He was our avatar in the thing.
you know what it is too. It's the
Yeah,
way that he looked. He looked like the everyday schlub. He
yeah.
didn't, he was the balding. He didn't have the hair. He was a little overweight. He was short. He wasn't the. Now they just have everyone has to look great. Everyone has to look like a model, or they literally have a model as the backstage interviewer. I don't know. It worked. Gene Okerlund worked. The guy that's
Yeah,
probably eating potato chips in his basement
yeah.
is the goat in that field.
Like I said, every man. He looked like the guy you knew in the street, or he looked like your uncle, whatever. And he was the average guy. He just had that, and he had that charm and that charisma about him.
Yeah, and you could tell how endearing he was when he got on Legends House, and he was
Yeah,
pretty much he ran the show on
yeah,
Legends House. They're like, "Oh, Gene's having a cocktail. Let's go join Gene. What's Gene up to?" And they would all follow Gene.
yeah. And you can tell, like, that we talked about how they treated like some of the legends in the past. Like he didn't like having these guys on TV all the time. He was always using something. After WCW, he always used Gene for something.
Yep.
Whether it was confidential, like I said, in Legends House, he would do special appearances, host DVDs, whatever. When they had the old 24/7 service, he hosted everything.
He
Even
didn't
then, he
want
was still good. He
he
was still
didn't
good to
want
the end.
he didn't want to let Gene go.
Yeah.
He couldn't afford to pay Gene at
Mhm.
that time. He just couldn't.
Not what WWE was offering.
And the same thing with Heenan. He couldn't afford the contracts.
And good on Bischoff there. A smart move.
Yeah. Very instant credibility
Sure.
brought to your show.
Your product. And look what Dave did. Like you talked about, you did Bash at the Beach. Look at what both Heenan and Gene did
Yep.
in that moment.
Because they were there with Hogan
The whole time.
during Hogan's heyday. Heenan and Hogan had a rivalry for years.
Yeah.
Okerlund was
His buddy.
the buddy.
He
And he told them
was his
to
best
shove
friend.
it.
Right. He was you, like how the fans felt in that moment. He turned on him like he turned on you. And he sold it like that. So
This isn't a talent who ever had to get into a ring and and have a match.
even though he did, but yeah, he did not have to.
Yeah. What was that? Late WCW?
Well, yeah, I know in the '80s he did a thing with Hogan. Him and Hogan teamed like at a house
Oh
show.
yeah, I remember that.
Put it
But
on TV.
that
But yeah,
really
like he
wasn't
wasn't like a common.
It wasn't like a pay-per-view though. So
No, it's done for locally in Minneapolis where they were popular. But from the AWA on, like he was with Hogan, with Andre, all these people, Flair. So he had
it
a
was
long time relationship with these people. We'd seen them together and screened for so long.
it was perfect. It was perfect.
Yeah, he's great. He's definitely the goat of that position.
And he was a smart, and Bischoff was smart, and
Yeah,
Gene was equally as smart because Gene got, I think, half of the money from the hotline.
something like that.
Half
We
the
made a lot of
money.
money off that.
Gene was. I would love to know the amount of money Okerlund had.
They had to have made a lot of money because him letting his voice that gave it more credibility. People would call that because he was the way he would sell it.
109, 9900.
Never forget that. He can make the dumbest interview sound cool. Just the different reaction, the different relationships he had with people when he would interview him. Like I said, Rick and him always had a love-hate relationship. Me,
Okerlund, they said his net worth was $9 million. I would say it was more than that. He probably had funny money. And I say that in an endearing way, that he had funny money.
Just a guy who was just a regular guy, came into the business, and for how many, 40, 50 years, I don't know how many years, an endearing legacy. So yeah, maybe we didn't mean this to be a tribute to Gene, but you know what? The work he did on this show alone.
I mean, we've already done a tribute show to him.
It's pretty much
96, but
it's pretty much the Gene Okerlund hour. Hey, that's okay. Who better?
I mean, I'm sure if you asked Flair, like, what helped drive this story, and I'm sure he's probably said it already, and I just haven't heard it.
Yeah,
he probably gives a lot of credit to Okerlund. It's true. And who was there with the tear in my eye? Who was there during that interview? Okerlund. It all makes sense when wrestling makes sense. When you're a viewer, what happens?
They
you buy into it.
Right.
You buy into it.
You believe that real friendship exists.
When you have just random matches every week, it is what it is. You appreciate the athleticism, but you forget that match a month later. You really do. We're talking about a match that had no suicide dives, no super kicks, no nothing. And we're talking about it almost 30 years later. With that being said, like, share, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you thought about this show, what you thought about Starrcade 93 in general. If you haven't watched it, watch it on Peacock. If you want to hear an alternative, episode 35, 83 Weeks, the Eric Bischoff podcast, I'm sure does a great job of detailing the pay-per-view as well. That episode's 2 hours and 40 minutes. This episode's 48 minutes. I would listen to ours first, then get their elongated take from the man who was the figurehead of WCW at the time. Frank, anything else you want to say?
Thanks for joining us as we went back in time. We love doing this, especially going back to our youth.
Yep. What are we doing next week?
Do tell.
Spring Stampede 94, is that what we're doing?
Are we doing that?
Yeah, I'm going to make executive Spring Stampede.
Yeah, let's skip ahead. I think that's a good choice.
Flair, Steamboat. I think we get Sting and Vader, too, on
that. Sting and...
yes.
Sting and Rude.
Sting and Rude.
Vader does.
Austin, Great Muta.
Austin, Great Muta. You get Cactus Jack and Max Payne against the Nasty Boys in the Chicago Street Fight. This is another great.
That's actually pretty good.
Fun match. This show alone, actually, pretty much from top to bottom. I mean, I don't want to get into it yet, but really good show.
So stay tuned for that episode. Should be out in about a week and a half. So thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
We're freaking out.